We, well, what's up, man? Thanks for coming on the podcast.
Yeah,
I
good
think
morning.
you're the first person we've had that's not like an actual, like, you're not like making food. You're like helping founders, like grow their business. So I was really excited to do this episode, especially after the conversation me and you had last month. You seem like you're really passionate about the space. So I guess give everybody a little bit of background on yourself, like what led you into like doing like CPG supply chain of all things?
Yeah, so for some context, I run a private advisory practice specializing in demand planning and forecasting and inventory management. So specifically, the pain points we solve is keeping brands in stock and then also not having excess inventory. And then obviously then supply chain management. And my background's finance, and then I just kind of fell in love with operations through like M&A and turnarounds. And I just have an affinity for building businesses that have physical products and just been in love with it. I've been doing it for 15 years. Most of my life's been big corporate, and I've spent the last 3 years kind of coming down to like the small, like $5 to $15 million brands, and just kind of helping them build out that supply chain component that a lot of the big brands have access to, and the smaller brands don't.
Yeah. I mean, like when you're a small brand and like just me speaking from experience, the pain points are everywhere. And they usually come in the form of like what you just said, which is like the big guys have access to whatever it is. And you don't because you don't
Yeah,
have the resources or you're just getting started or you don't have the money. Um, the funny thing that always like comes to my mind when I hear that is data, because like data is something that is expensive to buy and nobody has until they don't need it anymore. Just
yeah.
kind of funny. So in your like I guess over the last couple of years or the last 3 years, what has been different about working with like small brands than the big places that you worked at before?
I think, well, they're in a better position because they actually have a lot of the bigger brands are kind of stuck in the sense they have a lot of legacy systems that in order to change those legacy systems would cost them millions and millions of dollars. So a lot of these bigger companies, they have like 3 or 4 different systems, probably from like the 80s or 90s, and they're like scotch taping these together, but they're big enough where they can have entire teams of people that are kind of handling that stuff. So the systems are bad, but they have the resources to like hire headcount and things like that. The smaller brands, it's nice because they're kind of starting from scratch. So it's bad because they're all out of zero, but it's good because anything they do will be like 0 to like 80%. So, if you have clean data, even if it's something as simple as like properly managing your Shopify and your QuickBooks, you're in a good place. I think the biggest thing, and this is why like a lot of the conversation around like AI and machine learning, and they're like, aren't you worried they're going to take your, it's like, I have not come across a company yet that had clean enough data where they could like put their forecasting and their demand planning and inventory on autopilot with the system. But that, to your point, is the root cause. That's the very few companies have strong data, strong processes, people looking at the data if they have it. So that's where I tell all companies to start is get your data in order. Even if it's something as simple as like you could probably get away with Excel until you're like about $5 billion. So even just something like a spreadsheet that you have someone day to day manually inputting data, as long as you trust that data, that's the most important thing.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. And like just I don't know, from my background, I always see like how it's essentially impossible. I mean, it's not impossible, but it is a tall order to have your data so clean and so integrated, or like your systems in general, whether you're a small company or a big company. So yeah, like you said, like put it on autopilot. I always think the funniest thing about AI or the things that people want it to do are the fact that it doesn't integrate or talk to anything yet. Like I was amazed when ChatGPT came out with a Gmail integration. I was like, this is crazy. And the funniest thing about this is that Google's AI Gemini doesn't have a Gmail integration. They're sitting here like the company that makes it doesn't even integrate with it. Which I think should tell everyone one thing that I think should hold true, which is that machine learning is great, AI is great, large language models are great, but the people that make them don't even trust them enough to like not mess up. And I think until it's
Yeah.
like trustworthy, that it's not going to like screw up in a big way. Like I wouldn't trust something like that to start doing all of my supply chain for me. Or you're going to end up with a
Yeah.
situation where like something doesn't show up.
Yeah. And I think it's just one of those things where it's the hot topic right now. Right. Like I've been in supply chain, in finance, in operations for a while. They've been talking about machine, like now it's called AI, but before it was called machine learning. So they just come up with a different name. But I've been told, like, since I started in operations 20 years ago, that all of our employees were going to be machines by now, and they're not. So I think it's a hot topic right now. I don't think AI is going to replace anything. I think it's going to be critical. I think you need to know how to use AI. I use AI on a daily basis, but I don't think. I think it's more like when you were in school and you had the teacher that kind of like would grade on a curve. I think everybody who sucks is going to become okay if they use AI. But if you're really good, someone who isn't from your field using AI won't be able to beat you. So, like me, trying to create like a marketing out of AI, I could do it. It's easy enough. But someone with a marketing degree who understands psychology will blow me out of the water with AI.
Yeah, dude, I totally agree with that. So what do you use it? You mentioned you use it daily. Like what are you using daily as far as like AI, like in your own life? And then maybe like business wise.
Yeah, everything. So one of the most popular things I've done, which isn't even really directly related to operations, is I created an internal board of directors on my AI. So I have like Warren Buffett and Jay Abraham and all the guys that I respect as business leaders. And I created a virtual board of directors. So whenever I have a business problem, I give it to the AI thing. And what happens is I have it built so that they argue against each other. So each person will give their own opinion based on that personality. And then they'll argue with each other and they'll show me the argument until they come up with like a consensus that they all agree on. And so that's kind of changed the way I run my business. Um, as far as like a cost effect, I use it a lot for data cleaning. So especially if you're doing like Excel files, a lot of times there's just human typos, or like maybe you have a state and some people put Cali, some people put CA, some people spell it out. So AI is smart enough to kind of like recognize what the row is. And so if I upload a thing, I'm like, okay, this row states, go, create a consensus, like just put the whole state there. It will go and see who messed up and fix it. So data cleaning is nice for that kind of stuff. The general stuff most
Dude,
people do.
the board of directors thing is so interesting. How
Yeah.
are you like
So one
how
of
would you
the
set that up? You have like different systems like ChatGPT, like Gemini, like or is it all inside of like one and just different
yeah,
like
it's all inside of one
threads?
thing. Yeah. It's inside of one thing. I'm actually thinking of doing this for some CPG founders, is creating a virtual Shark Tank where I'll have all the Shark Tank guys in there, and you can basically, propose your business, and they'll basically critique you like you were on the show. And so it kind of be like a mock Shark Tank. So I've been thinking about putting one of those together. But yeah, it's amazing. Basically, what I do at a short level is create a deep profile on each person, and then upload the profiles, and then make it so that each profile has to kind of like chime in. And then I even have like a secondary option where it's like one person has to act as the devil's advocate. And even when you come up with a solution, I want someone to try and poke holes. And so they'll like, here's our solution, but here's the risks. Really cool.
I love that because like the thing I've ran into so often when I have kind of like a more subjective like planning conversation with ChatGPT. Like I have a couple threads where I've uploaded like documents on the business, like P&Ls, business plan, like general marketing documents, and I'll be like, hey, so like we want to do this new thing. What should we do? And I find that the longer I talk to it, the more it becomes a yes man, where it just
Yeah.
starts telling me like, that's a great idea. Let me regurgitate the junk you just told me right back to me. And I'm like, doing what you're doing and basically specifically telling it like, please don't do that. Is probably a really good idea. Because there's this new thing that's been happening to people. It's called, I think, AI psychosis, where this is just people in their personal lives. They'll talk to it about a subjective subject, like, should I break up with my girlfriend? And eventually
Yeah.
it just starts agreeing with you. Or it will like start, it does the opposite of what a therapist would do, which is that it just like pushes you down a path of crazy. And Megan and I
Yeah.
actually tried to do this with the flat earth thing. We were like, ChatGPT, we think the earth is flat. And it was like the earth is not flat. And eventually after like pushing it long enough, it was like, well, you might think the earth is flat. And that's okay. And you're just like, okay. So eventually, no matter what I do, I can get you to
Yeah.
agree with me, which is kind of funny.
Yeah.
So you like have to actually ask it, like, please don't do that because it's not helpful, especially in business.
Yeah. 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 That's like part of the prompting is like the language you use. So I'll always use words like audit this, audit that, so that it kind of knows that I'm not asking it to like kind of like agree with me. But yeah, I mean, ChatGPT is literally like your best friend and your worst friend at the same time, right? It's like the biggest enabler, but at the same time, it's like you got a buddy. I was reading a stat that 80% of what people use AI for now isn't even work related. It's just like having conversations to kind of like reaffirm something they already thought.
Yeah, there's definitely probably a lot of reaffirming going on. And it kind of leads me to my next question, which is when you jump in with a new founder or like a business that has grown to a level where like they need your help, how much of your job is like implementing the new systems or doing the things that you do that are operational? How much of your job is like coaching the founder to get there or the team to like get there? Because I imagine like that ends up being a lot like what you do. Like, hey, I'm gonna like kind of coach you guys through like the mindset that you need to have around like this new world order or like this new thing you need to do to like actually manage your supply
Yeah.
chain.
Yeah. And it usually depends on like how big and where the company is. So typically that under 5 million, it becomes more of a coaching than a like a service provider. And that's really just about like helping them not make what we call stupid tax, where it's like you just didn't know something and now you spent 50 grand on something that you didn't know about, or you went on and you got that, $10,000 inventory system, but you don't need it because you only have 3 SKUs and they're not even really moving anywhere. So a lot of people, what happens is that like just in life, you kind of like the ABCs of things you think you're supposed to be doing, and you just kind of follow this path that everybody else told you should follow without really auditing or seeing if it's even worth doing or if it makes sense for your business. And then also, like, no matter how big you get, at some point, the culture of a company is always going to come from the leader. And so, when it comes to things like change management, process improvement, no matter what systems you put in place, if you don't have a team internally that can own that kind of stuff, that's a problem. And a lot of times, if you have an owner that's kind of like cachet or off the cuff, a lot of times the employee will work that way too, which is great if you're like always in a firefight situation. Like everybody likes to say they're a firefighter, but being in a firefight every day isn't necessarily the ideal situation for growing a business, right? Like you want to be proactive in solving that problem. And so what happens is I've had clients where we make things so calm and easy, they don't like it. And they'll like purposely start sabotaging and like creating fires just to feel that they're working and doing something to solve problems. So mindset is a big thing. Um, the number of people that put roadblocks in their own way amazes me. Like business life in general. I've had a lot of clients where vendor negotiations, hey, the MOQ is 5,000. Let's try and get it down to 3. Yeah, the vendor won't do that. Have you asked? No, but I know that they won't do it. Can you just ask, just like make me happy? Come back tonight. Yeah, they said they'll do it. Like, I don't know why you had that story in your head that the vendor won't work with you, but there's a lot of that.
Yeah, that's actually really interesting. And it's something I'm dealing with right now, actually, like inside of Nobit is we decided, and you and I have talked about this, that we would stop growing the CPG business, like focus on profitability, shut our plant down, outsource to a co-man, and just see what happened. And we went and we found a really great new co-man that's making our cookie dough. It's gonna be shipping soon. But this whole entire time, in order to now say like, well, we're gonna be profitable, and you have to cut off a lot of like the nonsense that you were spending with the distributor, a lot of the nonsense you were sending with the like retailer, really simplify things. And then we're also still really small. So have a conversation with the co-man to say like, hey, like this is what realistic volume is like. Are you guys cool with that? And there have been like all these little tiny things, whether it was like the pack size change that we did was from a 6-pack to an 8-pack, because the new manufacturer makes an 8-pack, and like at our plant we were making a 6-pack. Not a big deal in my mind, but to Unify, huge deal. And Megan was like, oh no, like they're gonna charge us like $500 per SKU per DC. We're in all the DCs. like we're talking about this really big bill. And I was like, yeah, let's just ask them to not. And it turns out they were like, oh yeah, that's fine. Just no fees.
Yeah.
Just because we asked. We had the wherewithal to say like, hey, this doesn't seem like that big of a change. It's from 6 jars to 8 jars in a box. Like, how complicated could it be? And too often people, they do tell that story in their head where they're like, oh, like this is just the way it is. I cannot ask. I cannot negotiate. I can't tell them how this is simply impossible for me. Because with our relationship with Unify now, it's like they have customers that want our product. They're not just going to like wreck the relationship over like a pack size change. That's stupid. And I think too often people don't think that way.
Yeah, and I think that brings a good segue to another thing, which is like, I would say 80% of the problems you think you have could be solved with just proper communication, like communicating with your vendors, communicating with your customers. Everybody's in this to build relationships and make money. Most of the time, just communicating something, even if it's bad news, will mitigate most of the risk.
That is so true. Dude, and it's true, like even in like just everyday life, like the more often you're like willing to just like talk to people and like let them know like, hey, here's what's going on, the more often it's like these like problems that we have are like no longer, they're non-problems. A lot of the things we deal with, like yeah, it's really, really strange how like people will take a thing and they're like, oh no, huge problem, but you're like, this is a couple phone calls away from being completely not probably a problem at all.
Yeah, I had a client.
There's like
I had a client who did hair shampoo, and one of her biggest customers was a distributor with a website. It was like a third-party website, and we went to her website. She's like a top-selling SKU there, and I was like, well, why don't you get on the homepage? She's like, that's so much money. Well, you don't understand. It's so much money to be on the homepage. I was like, listen, you're one of their top sellers. Just ask. She called them up. She's like, hey, how much would it cost to be on the homepage of your business for a month? They said, you're our top seller. We'll put you there for no problem. Don't worry about it. They literally put her up there for 3 months on the homepage like a banner. And her sales, like, well, I think 10% that 1 month. Just from it cost her nothing. Just asking.
Yeah, and that actually is like more common than people realize with like retailers, because a lot of people look at them as like this gatekeeper, this giant behemoth, or this thing that like we can't possibly like understand, and yet they're running a business too. They're concerned with doing well, and like when you're a good partner for them, they're typically really willing to do good things for you. Too often, I think in CPG, especially on LinkedIn, on the internet, there's a lot of complaining about like slotting fees, trade spend requirements, like all this other nonsense. And that's because the retailers are trying to protect themselves from, to be completely honest, a lot of brands who are bad partners. Whereas there's a right way to do things too. And then also like there's a, hey, you're forcing it way. Like you're in this retailer, it's not working. You're spending a bunch of trade spend, you're losing money. They're probably also losing money. They're probably also upset with the thing that's going on. And so it's like this thing where if you simply just went to the right places at the right time or found the right partners or weren't trying to force things, more often than not, things like that happen where it's like, yeah, we'll put you on the homepage for free because like this works. Our largest account at No Bake is DoorDash with like Dashmart, and they do similar stuff for us all the time. They never charge us for it. They were like, this is a product that works really well with their customer base, helps bring people to the app. Why would we not work on things that actually make us both money?
Yeah, and the great thing on the buyer side is like I don't want to say most people are bad at their jobs, but most people appreciate if you, at least if you make their job easier. So like the number of times I would say most of the time, the way that people interact with their buyers is very like passive, where it's like where the buyer wants something, they'll let us know. Whereas I'm a big proponent of like when I go to a company, let's let's tell them what to buy. So like I'll get the Walmart inventory, I'll get the Costco inventory, and I'll get the buyer on the phone once a month. And I'll say, okay, here's where you're at. Here's where you're at. All right, you guys want to place an order next month? Do you want to place an order here? Like we'll basically make their job easier. So instead of them having to sit on their screen and manage when they got to order, say we'll do that part. And now our business is going up because now we're for it. We're pushing through the pipeline rather than being like proactive and just waiting. And so it's a catch-22, right? Your business is better. You're doing more work internally, but their job gets easier. So now you're a better partner. And so though you'll get those extra, favors when you need to, or if you're out of stock, they'll give you the forgiveness kind of thing.
Yeah, that is honestly like so true. And something that I think I learned the hard way, and I think a lot of other people probably learned the hard way, which is that like a
Yeah.
lot of buyers are, especially the early stage brands, they're just like trying to do their best, but it's really, really hard. And it's really hard to predict
Yeah.
demand on a product that like you haven't had a lot of uh history with.
Yeah, that's the great thing. And that's why I kind of specialize in forecasting. People think forecasting, and it's like, yeah, you're forecasting so you can do production, but the forecast itself is a great communication tool to your vendors, to your buyers. Like you could take a forecast, go to your co-manufacturer, and be like, here's what we're planning for the next year. We want to break on this product, that product, this lifetime. Like because they have visibility, they're more comfortable in negotiating certain things. Where when they have no visibility, it's like, no, like this is the MOQ, this is what you got to pay. But if you're like, well, this is what we're doing over a year, a lot of times they can negotiate and have those conversations. Same thing on the buyer side. Like the forecasts aren't just executional, it's conversational. It's like, hey, we want to share with you what our expectations are. This isn't written in stone, like demand changes, but we just want to do our part in giving you visibility onto what we see our business doing over the next year so that we can work together and plan this out. And so the forecast, I say demand planning is all planning. If you don't have a demand plan, and most companies don't, they don't have a demand plan. They have a financial forecast, they have a sales forecast, but a demand plan basically forces all that because it's the actual market on what the consumer wants. It's not what the board wants. It's not what your financial aspirations are. It's like the demand plan is what the market wants. And then hopefully your financial plan, your sales plan aligns to that. Your production plan, your labor TAM, plan your raw materials. And then, of course, taking that information, going to the vendors, going to your raw material sources, your co-manufacturers, your buyers, your 3PL partners. A lot of times people will run promotions and they won't communicate that to the 3PL partner. And now they need staff to do the extra shipping. So it's just like taking that plan and like communicating across all the verticals.
That actually makes so much sense when you say it out loud, but I think a lot of founders don't think that way because a lot of people,
Yeah.
I mean, well, a lot of people are probably like sales minded, right? Like they get into like starting their own brand. They're like, hey, we're going to go to the moon. We're going to sell a bunch of stuff. And they don't really think about like what comes behind it, like operationally at all. Um, and like that always gets kind of fun because like in the early days, you can wing it or you can firefight all the time, like you said. But in the later stages, that becomes like less and less of a band-aid, and eventually it just doesn't even work, and you start running into real problems. Is there like a stage that you've seen most consumer brands at where it becomes non-negotiable to have a demand plan? And how often should somebody like update that?
So it really depends on what the product is and the lifetime of your shelf life and all that kind of stuff. For the most part, I'm going to say everybody needs a demand plan. I would actually say even a company that hasn't launched should have a demand plan in the sense that like a lot of these companies will go to market and not even know if there's a demand for their product, right? They spend everything. Like I have the podcast I did where I was basically, my background's economics and finance. And so for me, everything is supply and demand. Whether I was in finance or operations, it's all supply and demand. But what happens is it's called supply and demand, but people don't realize demand comes first. So what happens is you have to, figure out what the customer wants, what the market can bear, and then reverse engineer it and then create the supply. Supply is just fulfillment of demand. That's all it is. And so a lot of times you have these brands that are like, yeah, we're innovating this new product or this new item. And it's like, have you like done pre-sales? Have you done like polling? Have you tested your current customers? And they're like, no, we're just creating this item. And what happens is even at the big companies, they'll create these items. And it's not a function of like the market wanting it. It's a function of, well, how many do we need to make on the MOQ and how much money do we need to make this worth it? And then, so then they have all this product and now they're going to go create artificial demand by running like Facebook ads or commercials and things like that to hopefully push through. But now you ate into all your margins that you were expecting to make anyways. And so it just kind of is a wash. So every company should have a demand plan, even if it's at a high level, you know your market. The reason I work for brands that are that $5 to $50 million mark is because that's when the pain starts to really show. Like if you're losing 10% of your sales, being $1 million brand losing 10% of your sales, and being a $10 million brand losing 10% of sales, the 10 million brand feels it more just because of the relativity of the size. So 3 to 5 million is where like your stockouts and your excess really starting to bleed into your P&L. Like now you're losing like hundreds of thousands of dollars of money, where it makes sense to hire someone like me because now there's a return. If you're only losing like 20 grand a month or 20 grand a year on sales, to hire someone like me, just you will make your return. It's a wash. So when you get to like 3 to 5 million, the basic return would be like 8 to 13% on your top line. You'll make like 5 to 10% of whatever you invested in me. So it starts to make sense. But everybody should have a demand plan. I would say that you should look at it. You should plan out at least past double whatever your lead time is. So if your lead time is 3 months, you should at least have a 6-month plan. Same with your inventory strategy. But it really depends on the product. The least inventory you can hold, especially in the beginning, the better. In the beginning stages, it's not so much about like losing money. It's more about losing momentum, right? You talk to someone, they put you on the shelf life, or they put you on the shelf, they're testing you, and now you're out of stock for 2 weeks. You look bad. You might not necessarily lose a lot of money on the financial side, but you're losing that relationship and the opportunity, right? So when you're small, it's very much resource management. And so it's like going out of stock is a big deal, but at the same time, if you have a bunch of excess inventory, and a lot of times you're paying for this stuff up front. So you spend $100,000 on inventory now. By the time, and now it's just sitting there, and even by the time you ship it, it's like now 90-day terms to get it paid. So it's like the longer that sits there, the more your cash flow just kind of dries up, which is a problem for a lot of the smaller brands. So at the smaller brand, it's resource management. It's how to get smaller MOQs, even if you have to pay a little more. That way you can turn around faster enough. And then once you hit scales of economy, it becomes a different game.
That makes a lot of sense. And like just I mean, I think for most people that will listen to this and most people that are like getting started, I think the important thing to know and like to think about what you just said is like managing your resources when you're small is so important, and managing your cash flow is so important. And for most consumer product brands, like that is inherently tied to inventory. Like it cannot be tied to almost anything else. Is what you spend most of your money on. Sure, you spend money on marketing. Sure, you'll spend money on other things, but really like managing like when inventory turns into cash is super important. Because that's the thing that will make someone feel broke even when they're not.
Yeah, but going back to what you said, this is the biggest problem I see is everybody knows that if you're out of stock, that's an issue. But what happens is most of the time it's the excess. And the reason it's the excess is because, to your point, a lot of sales founders are sales minded and they're very optimistic. So them sitting on a warehouse full of stuff might not seem like a big deal because they're like, yeah, but we're talking to Walmart right now and they're going to come through, they're going to buy all of it. And now 6 months has passed and they still have all this product sitting in the warehouse. God forbid it's refrigerated or frozen and you're paying that kind of cost. But so they don't actually see the excess as an issue. They see it as like, we're just waiting for the next big deal and we're ready, which, cross your fingers that happens, but it doesn't always happen. And even when you get into the Walmarts and the Costco's, the number of time I've had a customer come to me and we're like, we just got into a Costco, our business is at 100x. And I'm like, well, they put you in one store. Let's see what the numbers look like. And they're like, well, they just told us they're going to give us 20 more divisions. And I was like, yeah, let's wait till we get the paperwork. Like they get like overly, and I get it. It's exciting. You're building a business. But I've learned a lot that like until the paperwork comes across the desk and you're in the stores, and even then, that's the starting point. If you don't sell and replenish, that's the loaded is it is what it is. But yeah, so it was matters. And again, the better you have the relationship with your co-mans, and it all kind of goes back. That's why it's called supply chain. The better you have that relationship, the shorter your lead times, the more nimble you can be when those opportunities come. If you don't have a nimble supply chain, you might not have a choice but to have 6 months worth of inventory sitting in a warehouse. So it's really building that supply chain so that you can like chase things. A lot of clients, what I'll do is like, if you think something's going to happen, this is just like a little tip. Don't build out the finished goods. Build out the raw materials, right? So go to your co-manufacturer, be like, oh, we're expecting this. We don't know if it's going to happen. We'll buy the raw materials and we'll eat the cost just to have it in case. But let's not make it until we know that the deal is actually going to go through. And if the deal doesn't go through, the raw material cost is usually less than the finished goods. You're not storing it, or at a minimum, it just takes you longer to kind of run through. But at least you're staging how the product is showing up.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I mean, for brands like mine, like nimble supply chain is key, like with a short shelf life in a refrigerated product. So I think some people feel it, like you said, more than others, and like they may respond to it a little differently. Like we never held inventory because it's a death sentence for us. Like it would just all spoil. Like it's a bad idea. Um, Whereas I meet a lot of new founders who have like an RTD drink, or they have like, I don't know, like some kind of shelf stable thing with like 18, 24 months, whatever it might be, shelf life, and they just bought a lot of it and they sit on it for a long time. Which is, I mean,
I
which
had a
is
company.
fine, and you can do that,
Yeah,
but it's scary.
I had a company that I won't say the name. They're one of the largest companies in their category. They do about 50 million in revenue. When I got there, I had to dump about $5 million worth of inventory. The shelf life is 3 years. So that means that stuff had been sitting there for 3 years before I got there. About $5 million worth of inventory, a $30 million brand, $50 million brand. And so, yeah, I mean, it's bad. And especially a lot of people don't realize that some retailers won't even take your stuff unless it's over a certain shelf life. So like there's some kind of like, I think Walmart, it's not 12 months. They're not taking it. So if your shelf life is 16 months and it's sitting in a warehouse for 10 months, by the time it gets ready to ship, it's no longer acceptable to the retailer. So a lot of people don't play that math. So excess is a big problem. I think excess is a bigger problem than stockouts. And I know it's probably not good to say, but I mean, just look at the number of distributors. I wish I would have invested in distribution centers 5 years ago. I don't know if like when I drive from Vegas to Cali, it used to be just nothing but dirt. Now it's just nothing but like Amazon and Walmart and these giant depot centers. It's like it's amazing.
Yeah, I would agree with you there though. Like it's definitely in my mind. I would rather have stockouts than excess inventory. It's just that's. I mean, you can make the claim all day long that like you don't want to let that happen, but I think it's kind of like a growing pain that I would rather experience than the opposite, which would cause you to lose money, whereas the other one might cause you to lose a little traction, but it won't put you out of business.
Yeah,
I
the
guess like moving.
stockouts
Yeah.
at least with the stockouts, you could tell the story that like my product's moving. We're flying off the like. At least you could twist the narrative so that at least it's like, oh, we're not stocked out, we're sold out, right? There's a difference. Like we used to do that, a lot of the larger companies too. It's like we would purposely sell out just to have the fanfare, like oh my, like during Christmas, oh they're sold out of this item, they're sold out of that item. It's like we didn't stock out, we sold out. Like you can twist the narrative a little bit. Again, it's not good. You're still losing sales and money, but at least on a buyer side, it's like, hey, your stuff's moving off the shelf. Let's get it back in there and make some more money. and you can be like there's a narrative to it that you can play
Yeah,
with.
and it's a good narrative. It's a positive narrative. Whereas like I could not possibly spin like we just threw away a bunch of stuff into, into a positive narrative. That's probably not possible. So tell me a little bit about the book that you wrote. Because I'm curious about that. You have it behind you. Mind your business.
Yeah.
Um,
This is
what caused you to want to write that?
so during COVID, we were doing a lot of virtual seminars, and my my job is very specific, and it's not really something that like speaking to the masses that kind of understand it. So I had to find something a little more generic. And so I was doing a conference, and they were like, "Well, just talk about like common business problems you see." And I was like, "Okay, well, I mean that's cool." So the book is called "Mind Your Business: The 5 Questions About Your Business You Think You Know the Answer to, but don't." And so the concept is every time I go into a company, I would basically just ask them generic questions, and these are the 5 questions that everybody would say, "Yes, we know the answer to that." So one of them was like cost of goods sold. Do you know what your cost of goods sold are? Yes, we know what the cost of goods sold are. And then now I'm 3 months into the project and I'm looking at the cost of goods sold and they're like 5 years old. And I'm like, yeah, these are not accurate cost of goods sold. But the entire time they're operating like they are. And so it just happens that like the 5 questions kind of hit on like every part of the supply chain. And so I was like, oh, this is pretty cool. It's like a little diagnostics for your business. And especially if you're like an entrepreneur, like starting out a business or you're like under that 5 million, a lot of it is like the questions you ask. So like, who's your customer? Everybody's my customer. No, they're not. Like if you're a barber, the guy that's bald is not your customer. Like everybody will say that they made a McDonald's, but McDonald's has an avatar of their customer. So it's like dialing it on your customer avatar, dialing it on your proposition, dialing it on your KPIs. How do you measure success? What are your KPIs? Right. So it basically like runs through the gauntlet of that. And it's the things again that people think they know, but they actually don't know. And so it's just like defining that and making people like write it down and think about it. And we had #1 bestseller on Amazon for operations research planning. And then I think we got like bestseller for or new release for small business and retail, which is kind of cool.
That's really cool. That's awesome. I guess it makes sense. How did you come up with the questions when you were like, okay, these are the things? Was it just like sitting down and like thinking it through, like all the people that you had worked with in the past, or was there a different process that you went through?
No, it was I was asked to do a seminar and I was just putting the PowerPoint together and I just kind of like sat down and my thing was just like 5 things you should know about your business. And then as I was doing it, I was like, oh, these every time I talk to someone, they say they know these. So the base of the seminar was called like you think you know your business, but you don't. And that turned into this. But yeah, I mean,
What
it's an
is
amazing,
the
it's a great book.
thing?
It's super easy to read.
I love that. So you mentioned COGS was one of the like 5 questions. What part of like cost of goods sold do people typically miss? Like what causes them to not know what their true cost of goods sold is?
Well, I think a lot of it is just like they just took the cost at whatever it is when they did develop it, and then I'll realize that like prices change all the time, especially if you're in food. Like chocolate could change on a dime at any time. So it's just a lot of times it's just like the upkeep. They kind of like scoped it out when they launched the product, and they kind of never looked at it again. A lot of times, a big thing is when people price, they price at the retail level, and they don't really recognize that there's different verticals. So I always have my customers price at the distributor level, and I was like, as long as you're making margin at the distributor level, everything else is gravy. And so it's kind of like how that like the nuances work. So a lot of them just don't have like margins. So like a lot of people are like kind of go over tariffs, and it's like, well, I understand the tariffs are a big hit, but if you had good margins, this is something you could probably weather. So I think margin management is a big thing, and recognizing like what are your sales channels going to even be? Because a lot of times when you're a smaller brand, you might just have a little shop at a farmer's market, and all you know is the consumer in front of you. And so you're like, well, it cost me $10 to make it. I can sell at the farmer's market for 20. Cool. And now, someone's walking the farmer's market. They're like, hey, you want to go to the local Whole Foods? And you're like, sure. And then you don't realize you're not going to sell that for $20. You're going to sell that for like 12. And so it's just understanding what that looks like in the future. And if you're going to get into retail, which I don't know why people would, understand what that looks like at a pricing level and having those channels.
Yeah. I totally agree with you there. That's been like it was a big discussion for me, really the entire like gamut of the last like 4 years of like running No Baked. So about like half the time we've ran the company was just like, how do we focus on like margin and how do we price the product to where we know we'll make money? And because it's a niche product and because it was unique, we were like, the consumer will meet us there and we'll see what the real demand actually is. But like, let's price it like where we actually make money rather than like going in reverse and saying like, hey, we're going to price this where we think people will buy it. Like that sometimes can put you in like a really like tricky place where you're like, you've priced this and now people are buying it and you're not raising prices. Like that may shock people and confuse them. And so I don't know, for us, we were always like 50% margin to the distributors where we're at. I make no negotiation on it. I think it's silly to make negotiation on it. It's dumb. It's bad business practice. People may call me stupid for saying that, but for us, it's worked. And for me, it's also allowed us to have like what most people would recognize as like a small business. Like we're not big. And yet we make money. And I've been told by many people like, oh, it's impossible to make money in CPG. It's impossible to make money in food. And like, maybe you just are not brave enough to price your product the way it's supposed to be. And like, that seems to be the case a lot.
Yeah. The problem is CPG, I don't know when, maybe like the last 10 years, has almost turned into like the tech model. Like the number of brands I find, like we're going through funding, we're valued at this. I was like, you're a CPG company. Why are we talking about valuations and fundraising? Like, are you profitable? Well, we're fundraising 10 million. It's like, but are you profitable? It's like they don't run a business anymore. So they think it's like an IT company. And I'm like, I don't know when that happened. But by the way, have you ever heard of a show called Reacher?
Yeah.
So I've never seen the show. I know it's really popular, but I was watching behind the scenes with the guy that plays the actor. And he's like, I love cookie dough. And he opens his fridge and your product was.
Oh yeah, he eats my cookie dough. Yes, he eats our cookie dough. That's been good. Alan Richardson is not a friend, unfortunately, but he is a customer. And his wife loves buying it. That's been a really cool thing to see. I think over the course of the years, and I think a lot more founders should look for that, is like true unpaid, just like validation. Like you were talking about that earlier in this conversation where you're like, do you know your demand? Do you know if people want it? Our validation came like really early and in a unique way. But I don't think it's generally has to be that unique. We went to farmers markets, right? And we sold the product and we were just a bunch of kids with a cooler and a tent and people lined up to buy it. And I think when you see that, no, this is not like nationwide validation. This is validation in a small place in a niche market, but like you're seeing that people will line up to buy a thing from you. And at the time, our MVP for No Baked was like cookie dough in a paper cup packed in a commercial kitchen that we shared with like, I don't know, like 100 other brands with a little sticker on it that said No Baked that like Megan had made. I don't know, like not even Canva didn't even exist yet. It was in like Photoshop or something. And I think when you see that and then you say, okay, now we can scale this thing, like that's the validation you want. That's what led to like, someone like Alan eating our product or like showing it in his Men's Health interview. It's what leads people, like there's plenty of other famous people that buy our product because we are based in Nashville. It's what led us to having like a 2-hour long line when we opened the first scoop shop. It was just like, hey, this is like basic like business practices. Like you're being validated. And by the way, I say all that now, and you've probably seen this because it's experiencing, is like I say all that now having made the mistake of like not listening to anything I just said for many, many years. Like you get a lot of that validation, and then you have this desire and desperate need to grow, and then you get roped into the tech thing. Like, oh, we're gonna raise money, we're gonna grow, we're gonna do D2C, we're gonna flywheel of growth, whatever the hell that means. I know what it means, but like, it's a silly thing to say out loud over and over again when it's like you're focused on reinvesting everything back into this thing in order to grow, yet you're not asking the question of like, what's the end game? Or your end game is something silly like, we're going to sell this business. Well, 80% of transactions in M&A are done by private equity, and you know what they want to see? EBITDA. They don't want to see stupid revenue growth. They don't want to see this dumb top line. They do not care. They're going to buy the 80-year-old family-owned chip manufacturer that makes kettle chips in the Midwest for 10x EBITDA because their plant is at capacity and they're killing it and they're printing money. Yeah. Like that's the thing that I think people don't realize in this business is that like what you said is true. And what is also true is all the people that are making money, all the people that were successful, the people that started the company in 1990 and 1980, before that, their focus was we sell product for $5 and it costs us $2 to make it or whatever. And in there, I find my like net profit. And like, for some reason that formula got lost on a lot of people where it was like, no longer do we care about like generating any kind of money. We only care about like growth or innovation or like saving the planet or whatever it might be. And you can, by the way, do all those things while also making money. They don't have to come differently. But if you don't focus on them at all, you're never going to have them. I think the last couple of years were important for people becoming profitable, but I also think it's important for people to see that like, if I sell 2 million, this is an example, everyone, I'm not telling you what my revenue or profit is, but if I sold $2 million of cookie dough next year, and I just told you it's 50% margins, that's like non-negotiable for us, 50%. Let's assume like shipping deductions and BS takes away 10%. So now I'm at 40. Our overhead is an ops manager and a broker and some insurance, and that's about it. So other than trade spend, I make $800,000. And I don't know about you, but like it's hard to spend 800 grand. Unless you're like, we're going to grow so fast that we have to do trade spend out the wazoo. So yeah, if you want to make money in this business and not have like a scaled business that's like doing $100 million in sales, it is possible. It's not impossible. Yeah. It's not easy. It's definitely not, there's no room for error. But I think too many people have been sold this story that like they need to grow, or they're going to die. And that's not necessarily
it goes back to one thing goes back to what we were saying before, which is like there's an ABCs of everything, but like people think they're supposed to do, and they don't really know why. Like everybody does, like it's sexy to be like, hey, I got into Walmart. You get to post it on your social media and tell all your friends, hey, I got into Walmart, I got into Costco. I have a client who I fight with all the time. The lady makes $5 million shipping stuff out of her house, e-commerce, direct to consumer, and she is hell bent on getting into like it's a beauty print, Ulta and Sally's and all these big retailers. And I basically went in, I took her business, and basically what I did is I forced her revenue to be basically 75% subscription. So now she's doing the same revenue. She doesn't really increase, but now it's gone from like new customers to like, it's now like static every month because it's a subscription-based model. To me, D2C subscription-based model is gold. If you can get a good D2C subscription model where it's easy to ship and you can just every 30 days, just reoccurring, that's the best. But she's hell bent on like, I gotta get into Sally's, I gotta get into Ulta, and it's like she doesn't realize she's gonna make no margin. The cost of it's going to be, you got to build out your supply chain to support it. It's just, but it depends on what you want. If you want to, but she doesn't want to sell, which is why it doesn't make any sense. She just wants to leave it to her kids. I was like, you can leave a $5 million business to your kids. They'll be happy. But it's, yeah, well, you got to set up what you want. If you want to go big,
I mean,
yeah, because no one's going to buy you until you hit that $10 to $15 million mark. So you got to kind of decide. It's like, I want to be that like $1.2 million or I'm going big.
Yeah. And even if they're going to buy you, I mean, I think a lot of people underestimate what like real transactions look like in the real world, like because they see like the headline ones. And it's like in the real world, like they're looking for like a strong business that has like potential. Like no one looks at it from the buyer's perspective. Like what are they going to do with your business when they buy it? How do they make their money back? And like no one wants to talk about that. Like nobody wants to talk about the fact that like they also have to make money, and therefore like why would they buy it? Me, like in my current phase of life, like I've been by like either investing in or like buying like small businesses. And it's like, no, you don't even buy these things for like 20x sale. Like it's just not what you do. You look for like a way that like, yes, you can make it great for like the person selling it to you. You can also make it great for like yourself. You meet in the middle somewhere, use a shit ton of debt. Um, like there's a way that thing works. No, if you're a client though that's doing $5 million in like mostly subscription, that's insane. That's amazing. And I'm imagining with like a lightweight product that it's easy to ship and
Yeah.
the whole thing's
Yeah.
good.
Super
Like
easy to
that's
ship.
like, dude,
Yeah.
it's amazing. Screw Ulta.
Yeah.
Don't sell it to them. Probably, yeah, you're probably right. You probably will like go on this adventure to make all this revenue, and then like at the end of the day, work 3 times as hard and make absolutely no money for it, which is kind of funny. And like we all got to find out somehow. That's how some people got to find out.
Like, I don't even think that like people realize that when you go into retail, you have to redo your packaging, like the legal, all that kind of stuff that's right on the packaging. Like you could go to a farmer's market and you can just fill up a bottle and you'll be fine. You go to retail, like there's the whole game changes.
Yeah, it does. And it gets a lot more complicated. And it's like you don't want to put yourself in that position if you don't have to. I think for me, now that I've experienced all the business models you possibly could experience food, I really don't like uh, wholesale. And I think there's 2 reasons. One of them, definitely the supply chain piece is like way more complicated. It's way longer. You sell to a distributor who sells to a retailer who sells to my customer. That's complicated. And the second thing is like just getting the buy-in takes a really long time. And to your point earlier, like big companies move slow, and like the slower they move, the more annoying it is. Especially when you're an entrepreneur trying to like make a buck. And that speed, which is not there, there's no speed. That slowness combined with the fact that like the supply chain's so long that like I have this product that I can sell D2C, I can make it, I can ship it to the customer. I can actually do it cash backwards where like they buy the product, then we make it, then we ship it. So like I'm never even floating money for inventory. Whereas like you have this other thing where it's like you could have like a 90-day float on inventory, like cash locked up, and inventory or AR or whatever it is. And that's just a very different business. And it's also going to be like a lot more complicated. You got to keep a lot of people happy. Not saying it's not worth it, but it's like it has to be worth it to you. To your point, like it has to be something you actually want to do, and you have to have a reason for doing it. Too many people jump into things in life, no reason, no thought process, no like, hey, they like to your point, they're just like ABC, like this is the path, this is what we do.
Yeah. And also, like we were talking about like holding excess inventory because of optimism. There's also like we call it the Walmart effect, where it's like you get into Walmart, you invest in your supply chain, you hire all these people, and then maybe like a year goes by and then Walmart doesn't renew. And now you have this $1 billion supply chain that you built. I have a client that I was working with that was based out of Hawaii. They ran Hawaii, like their product was the most popular thing in Hawaii. They got picked up by Whole Foods. They're like, you know what? I think it makes more sense to get like a secondary facility out in Las Vegas instead of just shipping from Hawaii all the way to the mainland. Let's just get a little factory in Las Vegas. They built out a factory in Las Vegas. It took Whole Foods. They did it for Whole Foods. It took Whole Foods 3 years before they started taking the product. So these people had to like keep raising money just to float this investment for 3 years before Whole Foods actually actualized and started taking the volume.
Yeah, that's a story that's all too common. You talked about that earlier, but like people they will dump money into a relationship, like whether it be Walmart, Whole Foods, whoever it might be, and then they'll just get dropped. Megan and I actually, we got into Kroger. I don't have like a lot of bad blood to Kroger, but I have a little because of this. We got into Kroger. Buyer was really cool. Spent about 2 years trying to like get her to like kind of take the product for a test. We had a lot of like market validation saying like, hey, our customers want to see it there. And when Megan and I talk about our customers again, it was like we had 200,000 emails from like the scoop shops and like D2C, and we had a lot of like direct to consumer customers, especially via the scoop shop. And they're very geographically centered because they're people going to a physical store. So we like went to them with all this data saying like, hey, like we did surveys of these people and they say that if they were to buy it like outside of our scoop shop, they'd buy it in Kroger. That's where they shop. They're just like asking the people that go to our scoop shop, like, where do you shop? They say Kroger. We eventually go there, buyer takes it, we're all pumped. Like 10 months later, they bring it in, or 8 months later, however long it was. It was like basically meeting in January. They brought it in August. And then we were in there in August. And then in December, they're like, hey, we're not going to meet for like a reset meeting. I'm like, okay, it's fine. I don't know why you would reset it. And because it's like we've been in here for like 2 months. Like things seem to be going pretty well. Like turns aren't that bad. We were hitting the trajectory that they wanted. And then the buyer switched desks and the new buyer was like, yeah, I'm not going to renew it. And so we like were in Kroger technically for a year, but we were really only in Kroger for like 2 months before they were like, yeah, we're not going to bring the product back in. And the funniest thing about that was like, had we gone, I mean, it wasn't a very big test at all. It was just 200 stores. Had it been like a gigantic thing, yeah, it does like take your supply chain for a freaking loop, because it's like, hey, we like planned this thing, we like built this thing out so we could support you, and then you were just like, nope. And that's completely out of our control. That's a buyer switching desks. That's probably Nestle giving them a bunch of money. And I'm not mad about that. And it's funny to see though, because I think a lot of brands expect like, oh, I got in, I will stay in. And it's like, that's not how this works. And that's not even how this works, like to the point of like, you could be doing well. You could just be under like we are in a very, very competitive shelf where there's two very large conglomerates control most of the shelf and the rest of it's private label. And then there's like us and like three other, I mean, there's us and actually there's probably like 30 other brands, not necessarily anymore, but I mean, probably still because they start up every day. Like there's 30 other brands vying for the refrigerated dough shelf. It's a 4-foot shelf. And like, they're not break and bake Nestle. You're not break and bake Toll House. Sweet Lawrence obviously is like a staple at the moment, but like they're still like a teeny tiny company compared to the other people on that shelf. And so like when you see people build out these supply chains for someone who's like supposedly taking a chance on them, it's like, yeah, dude, there's a lot of risk in that. A lot of risk. And to build a whole facility in Las Vegas, that's crazy. I'm glad that they did not go bankrupt, because that would be sad.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, like I've seen it with Costco's, I've seen it with Walmart's. It's and the thing is, like Walmart's and these big companies, they have an incentive to bring in smaller brands. Like it's part of the buyer curriculum. It's like we're gonna have X amount for our evergreens, X amount for new brands, and then X amount for like community brands. Like I couldn't imagine a small business, especially like if you're minority owned or an ethnic brand, guarantee you're getting in front of a buyer in front of Walmart and Costco. Like their initiatives corporate wise will not let them say no. But once you're in, I think most people, like when they hear supply chain, some people think like production, some people think like logistics, but supply chain is like end to end. And it's not even like production to on shelf. It's once you're on shelf, getting it off shelf. So like the on shelf is just kind of the starting point. How do you get it off shelf is a whole other part of the business and the supply chain. And so I think that's we need to recognize that. When I would work with my companies, I would always meet directly with the sales team, and I would basically give, because a lot of them are very analytical, I would give them like the analytical scorecard that tells the best story. It's like, yeah, we might only be doing 5 units to shelf, but the biggest brand is only even though they're selling more, if you take it on average, they're actually only doing one. And so we're actually, on average beating the biggest brand. And like basically tell the narrative so that the buyer, it's kind of like selling anything, like give them an easy reason to say yes. So it's like, hey, here's the data, here's how we're tracking, here's our forecast, everything's green lights. We want to do more business. And like it makes their job a lot easier, especially when it's between, this person and that person. Because there's only so much shelf, right, on a available. And I think that's what also
Yeah.
people forget. They're like, oh, maybe they didn't want us. It's like, well, it's not that they don't necessarily want you. It's that there's 10 spots and they got to fill those 10 spots. And there's 100 brands. So it's like American Idol. It's like you gotta show up and like dazzle them a little
Yeah,
bit.
they gotta. Yeah, and they honestly have to they have a really hard job. They have to pick a bunch of stuff that they're not really sure like what's gonna what, and it's a very difficult job. All right, man. Well, I think we're actually like over an hour, which is great. I'm glad it went long. Tell everyone where they can find you, where they can find the book, if they want to like hire you or anything like that, or they just want to chat after this. Like, where can people connect with you?
Yeah, so Walid Nasserdeen on most platforms. LinkedIn, IG is kind of where I spend most of the social or business time. The book's on Amazon. Just type in Mind Your Business. And then WN Dean, like kind of my initials, WN Dean Advisory is the website.com.
Sweet. I'm gonna throw the link to the book in the show notes, and everybody please go out and actually do your supply chain. And if you can't, hit Walid up, and he will help you. Because you probably need some help. All right, dude. This was a great conversation. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, I appreciate you. This is fun.
All right.